So the question that was handed to me as I arrived this evening is, what is the theme of My Children, My Africa as a whole? And how many themes do we have in the play from the beginning to the end? Okay, so let's just try to figure out why the student is asking this question. So when we look at theme, okay, forget about My Children, My Africa. Just let's look at theme for a moment. What do we mean by theme? So it's a main idea in a text. Some teachers say it is the message of the text. I tell you why I don't like that as much, because it almost seems as if the author is setting out, like, to give us one particular message. And if we don't get it, there's something wrong. But all right, let's go with the main idea or the message. Now, where do themes come from? Start with the story of the text that you're studying. So we're talking particularly novel or drama. So look at the story. What happens in your story? Why do these things happen? Plot. What are the results of choices? What about conflict? What kind of conflict is there? Remember that literature depends on conflict. Without conflict, you aren't really going to have a literary text. So what do you notice that I'm doing? I'm going through the key features of the literary text in order to get to theme. So mood, atmosphere, yes. I think I would rather go here to character. So who are the characters in my novel or my drama? Now, when we talk characterization, we immediately are getting to theme. Because characterization is, why has the author made this character like this? What is the point or the message or the idea that the author is exploring by making the character this kind of person? So if we go back to what we said, so main idea or point, what it seems to be the point of this. So this is why you cannot speculate. You can't say, but if the character hadn't done this, then this wouldn't have happened. Of course not. Or you can't ask a question, what would have happened in the story if so-and-so hadn't done this, or if so-and-so had done this? You need to remember that a novel, a drama, they're a construct. They are something that the author has built. And the author builds it in a particular way. So instead of saying things like, but what if? Or he shouldn't have done that, he should have done this. The author built the character so that he didn't do that, and he did do this. Or the author built the character in such a way that if the character's in this kind of situation, that's what we would expect. Because I'm saying that the way that an author builds a character must be consistent. So, as a person, if we are going to believe in this character as a real character, as a real person, there must be consistency. So what you need to work out is, why does this character behave in this kind of way? And then if we're looking at characterization, it's why did the author, the writer, the playwright, the dramatist make the character like that? What is the point that the author appears to be driving at? All right, so I think that's a sort of general thing about theme. So when we come to My Children, My Africa, so the student says from the beginning of the text. So let's not look at the title, because the title comes way into the text. Let's start with the first scene. So I'm trying to work out for myself, what are the themes of this book, or rather of this play? So we're starting with scene 1. And you start with the fact that you are in a classroom. So you say to yourself, now, isn't that interesting? If I'm sitting in the audience, I've settled in, I've got my cold drink, I've got whatever it is I'm going to eat, my popcorn or whatever, and I'm settled in. Let's imagine we're at the theater and there are lots of people there. Okay, let's just get that. And let's say there are no curtains, so I can see the stage set up before it even begins. And I look at it and I think, oh, this looks like a classroom. So you say to yourself, why? Why would Athol Fugard choose a classroom? Well, what do we associate a classroom with? Education. All right? Looking at the classroom, I doubt we could tell what year it is, because classrooms, come on, you must have seen classrooms of 150 years ago. They look kind of like a lot of the classrooms still. So we're not going to be able to check a year, but we're looking at setting. Do you see I'm back to the key features of the literary text? So you say to yourself, well, I think this play is probably going to be saying something about education. Now, isn't education a theme? No. Education is an issue that the author is exploring. What seems to be the message about education? So as you are leaving the theater and you're chatting to your friends, what would you guys be saying about the education that you are seeing on the stage, or that has been explored during the course of this play? So my advice to the student is to say, okay, how well do I know this play? Education. Well, I know he talks about Bantu education, which is inferior and is deliberately inferior. I know that he has a character who, when he was a child, was very eager to go to school, who kind of believed in school, believed that school would give him a future. And if you know your play, we're talking about Tommy. And Tommy says his future will be to be a doctor. And he will make sure that white people give enough money to him so that he can serve black people for free. Because he says there's not only a problem with where they live and things like that, but there's also a problem with healthcare. So education is one issue. And then, would I say that healthcare is a major issue in this play? No. Why not? So when the students said to me, how many themes are there in this play? Healthcare is only an issue when Tommy's talking about what he imagined as a child. He wanted to improve society. And as a child, he thinks the way to do this is through becoming a doctor and helping the physical health. So healthcare, I want to put in the middle here, he's dealing with the physical health and well-being of black people. And he says one of the issues is that this isn't dealt with properly either. So in that way, it links back, or I wish, okay, I can do it here. It links back to education. If education is inferior, then so is healthcare. And how are we going to improve this in the future? Well, Tommy has one idea. Now, do you see what we're doing? I'd like in some way to zoom so that you could see it all together. We are developing the themes. Is healthcare a major theme? No, it's mentioned once. But we are reminded that part of the apartheid system was to neglect Black people in many different ways, not just education. We've got the township, we've got the roads, we've got the infrastructure, or let me put it this way, we've got the lack of roads, we've got the lack of infrastructure, we've got the lack of healthcare, we've got the lack of doctors, we've got the lack of hospitals and clinics. So it falls in, so you say, okay, hang on, wait, I want to develop this. So I want to go, where is my setting? My setting is in a classroom. But my setting, the broadest possible place of my setting is South Africa. Then smaller, I am in a township, I am at Zolile High School and so on. So I am in which province? I'm in the Eastern Cape and I'm in South Africa. But setting is not only place, it is also time. And time is important. So the big time is apartheid, but that's not specific enough. We're in 1985. Now, we learn that quite quickly. So you say, all right, so one big issue that he is exploring is apartheid. So is apartheid a theme? No. Is education a theme? No. Is the future a theme? No. But we can start to put these things together. Let me get some space. If we go right, now let's try and put these together to get a theme. Under apartheid, for Black students, education is not going to provide a future that will lift either the individual or their families out of poverty. That in fact, the education designed for Black students is to limit their futures to, do we know the word constrict? Like to tighten, like strangling their futures, so that their futures are not what we associate with the word future, which is hope, but their futures will be hopeless. So we've come to one theme, which leads us on to, well, how do we change this? Tommy, as a child, thought he could bring about change through education, but I've just proved that's not going to happen. So, again, how well do we know our play? There are two ways that are suggested in the play for change. One is reason, negotiation. How do we know this? Because what does the play start with? A debate. This is going to take us to this theme. But what does Tommy feel? That the time for this kind of method of bringing about change, the means to bring about change, the time for that is past, it's over. So notice I'm going to character. Tommy is the central character for saying, Black people have tried this. and it hasn't worked. Why not? Because white people won't listen. White people are determined to remain elite, determined to control power, determined to oppress. And so, no, they are locked in. The debate will go on forever and ever and ever if it's left to that. So I want a different color. So Tommy is saying no. No. The time for that is past. The time for that is over. Amandla! So where am I getting my themes from? From my knowledge of the play. That we see what is the central conflict. I'm looking at my key features of a literary text. What's my central conflict? The conflict between Mr. M and Tommy, between those two characters. One saying, you cannot vandalize, you cannot break down things, you can't burn and destroy. That's not the way to do it. That's not civilized. And Tommy's saying, heaven! We are beyond that because we're not dealing with civilized people. White people are not civilized. So you cannot use those methods. It's never going to get us anywhere. We need the bombs and the fighting and the weapons and we need the townships to go up in flames. That's what we need. Liberation before education. And that is actually, do you remember? That's what the child is writing on the wall when he sees Mr. M and he says, Mr. M, have I spelt it correctly? My children, my Africa. All right, so I could go on and on and on, and I better stop. But what I'm saying is there's not a limited number of themes. There are issues in the play. And you just have to open your text at any point and say, okay, what issues is the playwright dealing with at this point in the play? So I've told you about the beginning. So let's just open it at random. What do we get? Wordsworth. So you know immediately what's going on. Isabel and Tommy are preparing for the literary competition. Super. Why? Because Mr. M has the idea of showing white and black children working together and showing that this is possible. We do not have to be enemies. We do not have to be opposed. We can actually support each other. What does the play show? That for Tommy, the time for that is past. It's not going to happen anymore. There's too much conflict. If a black person works with a white person, they're a sellout and they deserve to be killed. That's where we are. And don't forget, always, we've got the time frame at the back of your mind. You need to know your history. So you've got to bring that in all the time. Where are we historically? What's happened? All right. Where are we, for example, we remember in this month the death of Steve Biko. What year? Where are we in terms of time? Are we before or after that? Are we before or after 76? Where are we? Well, obviously we're after. But the June uprising, where are we? Okay, historically, that'll also give you what he's exploring. What else do we see as themes on this play? Well, this is all white education. It's the traditional poets, the romantics, Wordsworth, Shelley, Keats. So that raises an issue which is not actually raised in this. But what does that tie in with we know so much better? Decolonizing education. So although he might not have been exploring that explicitly in this play, we, reading it now, can say, hang on, let's look at what they were studying for that competition. Who were they studying for that competition? Now, if it's an English text competition, fair enough. Text written in English. But why are we looking at Wordsworth and Keats and Shelley. Now, they are relevant because these are the Romantics, and there was a whole thing with revolution, and we know about the French Revolution and all of that. So it's got that relevance. But you might say, but hang on, why couldn't we be looking at African writers? So do you understand? There are all sorts of issues. So how can I answer this question, which is, how many themes do we have? Well, I've suggested that looking at a colonizer version of education might not have been what he intended when he wrote the play, but it's what we are going to think as we look at this and discuss, why are these poets relevant, but are they the only ones relevant? What does it tell you about the people who set up the competition, etc., etc., etc.? Okay, let's just try it again. So we open it. Whoa, too late. That's the questions. Okay. It was like being in a nightmare. This is Mr. M. This is Mr. M trying to get the children back to school. School, education. Education is the way to the future. Mr. M wants them back in the classroom. What does he do as a result of wanting them back? He goes to the police. How do they see him? As a sellout, as a stooge, as a traitor to black people's interests. What happens to him as a result? He gets killed. So, conflict. And if we come back to this, hang on. Does the play offer us a definite answer to how do we bring about change? I don't think the play does, because we've got Mr. M on this side and Tommy on this side, and by the end of the play, Tommy has gone into exile. There is no future for him in this country. He is going to work to bring about change from outside the country. But that's a loss of our young leaders. So that leaves Isabel. Well, I think she certainly identifies more with Mr. M than with Tommy. But isn't that because she doesn't really understand? Isn't that because she's been brought up in this white bubble where she really doesn't know what's going on? She really doesn't understand the lives of black people, doesn't understand what they face, the obstacles, the hurdles, the racism, the insults, the negativity, all of that. Isn't it that's why she sides more with reason and negotiation, because it's more conservative? Isn't that probably why she's there? Does that make her and Mr. M wrong? We come back to the time. Were they wrong in that time? Was there any other answer except Tommy's answer? So you need to look at the fact that this is what the play is exploring. Relationships, people, racial issues. How do we see that right at the beginning of the play? Because if there are curtains, the curtains open to show us white children debating against black children. There it is, right there. You've got racial issues being explored, and what is privileged for one and underprivileged for the other in terms of the classroom. She actually looks around the classroom and she says, how do you even study in this? It's like just like grey concrete and cement. It's kind of, what a dreadful environment. How do you become future leaders in this? And for Tommy, it's not so much this as the physical environment. It's the mental environment of the education he's being given. Now, Mr. M argues, but I taught you how to think. I taught you how to question. I taught you to go against the government. And you've learned your lesson really well, because guess what? That's exactly what you're doing. And Tommy says, no, you weren't teaching me enough to think, to break the mental chains. Okay, so do you see how you get to theme? Story, plot, conflict, setting, character, atmosphere, language. Language, and I haven't even started in on language. So if you would like to send another question and tell me which little bit of the play you would like me to discuss. But no, there's not an infinite number of themes, but there are lots of themes around education and race and conflict and how you bring about change in a country. And that's still relevant because we're still trying to bring about change.